Hey folks, so let's just dive right in to talking about the education measurement perspective for validity. It is a wonderful complement to the causal inference perspective from Shadish, Cook, and Campbell. So don't view these as like mutually exclusive. They jive. They work well together. But let's dive in with my my little motivating preamble. So validity. This is by far the most fundamental issue regarding test scores and their uses. It hinges upon the evidence we bring to bear to support any inferences that are to be made on the basis of test results. So the primacy of validity is so prime and so in the forefront that I apologize. That it's the first chapter in the testing standards. And just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to define it. So validity is defined in the testing standards as the degree to which all the accumulated evidence supports the intended interpretation of test scores for the proposed purpose. So this is on page 11 in the 1999 edition, which I think is the most current one. But implicit in this definition are three interrelated ideas that reflect the testing profession's current views about this central and multifaceted concept. Hi, can I help you? What is up? What is up? I don't know what you want. Talk to me. Oh, you won't talk to me? Okay, fine. Yes, I realize he's a cat. And for those of you who want to see Annie, I'd love to see her too. She's a very skittish cat. But whenever you see Archie, you're seeing about the equivalent of 50% of Annie because they're siblings. Litter mates, actually. Okay, let's dive in. I apologize. Okay, so here are those three key ideas. One, that the validity of test score stems from all the accumulated evidence to support their interpretation and uses. Thus, validity is always a matter of degree rather than an all or nothing determination. So validation is part of the process whereby validity evidence is gathered. This is the kind of perspective that ed measurement takes. And it begins with this explicit idea that the test developer of the Okay, let's back up. Excuse me. Can I help you? Yeah? I'm sorry you're bored. I'm sorry. What do you want? He's just going to be a nuisance today. So validation is the process of validating, whereby validity evidence is gathered. So that process begins with an explicit statement by the test developer of the conceptual framework and rationale for a test. But in its the validation process in its very nature is very open-ended because all the information gathered adds to our understanding of test results. So two, as the theoretical understanding of and empirical evidence for a test interpretation accumulates, the validity inferences, so the hypotheses, all the conclusions we draw made on the basis of the test scores for various proposed purposes may be enhanced or diminished. So a corollary of this, which is explicitly stated in the testing standards, is that validation is a joint responsibility between the test developer, so they're the ones who provided evidence and a rational use for the intended use of the test, and the test user who evaluates the available evidence within the context of the test being used. So that's two. So three. So because of the many different purposes for which test scores may be applied, the evidentiary basis for test score interpretation can be derived through a variety of methods. So contributions to the validity evidence of test scores can be made by any systematic research that supports or adds to their meaning regardless of who conducts it or when it occurs. So as long as sound scientific evidence for a proposed use of a test score exists, qualified test users are free to employ the scores for that purpose, whether these were foreseen by the developers of a test or not. This proposition hopefully explains the multifaceted nature of validation research, as well as its often redundant and conflicting findings. So all of these three things account for the longevity of some instruments, such as the MMPI. So that's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, and the Wechsler scales, for which the literature is just vast. And it encompasses numerous applications in a variety of contexts that have been accumulated over decades on the basis of basic and applied research. And you'll also notice, I have noticed at least, as I've worked with a whole, centuries worth of intelligence tests. Good questions, like good ideas from tests, keep coming up again and again. And so even if you have a test that is not explicitly related to like the Otis, or which was like one of the first pencil paper tests, that was group administered, or Army Alpha or Beta, it is very likely that many of the question types still exist and are extended. Now, obviously, sometimes they're copy and pasted, but for the most part, like the good ideas persist. And while the bad test items tend to at least disappear for a bit, and then they come back because people forget and they thought it was a good idea. But enough about that. My point is that there's a long, long history in testing, and it comes up in the weirdest ways. Okay, but let's keep moving forward. So let's actually talk about that ed measurement perspective. So there's a total hot mess of validities out there that you've probably heard about. I've probably listed them: content, construct, phase validity, which is not a real validity, concurrent, predictive, discriminant. I could keep going, but I don't want to muddle the waters even more. And so it just was a hot mess. And so in 1995, the Joint Committee of AERA, so that's the American Educational Research Institute, the APA, so the American Psychological Association, as well as NCME, the National Council on Measurement and Education, all came together to just try and make sense out of the hot mess that became validity. And part of this hot mess possibly came from the fact that the kind of broader, chiller approach to causal inference of Cook and Campbell used this idea that, well, let's just eliminate threats to validity. Sure, there's a nice big classification system, but there's, of course, chaos. There's a nice classification system, but it was a little laissez-faire, a little Wild West. And so the ed measurement perspective and was very helpful, as well as the most recent edition of the causal inference book with Jadish, Cook, and Campbell, which came out, I think, right around maybe 2001. So right around the most recent edition of the standards for education and psychological testing. So that thing I talked about like 2 slides ago. And so here are those standards. According to the Joint Committee, validity is the evidence for inferences made about a test score, and that there are 3 broad kinds of evidence. You can view these as classes, and it would be good to know all of these 3 classes and be able to compare and contrast them and think about examples. Wink, wink, wink. Hopefully this is subtle enough for all of you. So yeah, the 3 big types of evidence, and I'll crawl through these, are content related, criterion related, and construct related. And this is different from the notion of types of validity. This is an evidence-based approach, similar to the causal inference perspective where you're looking at threats to validity. So you're looking for evidence against whatever you're trying to test and alternative explanations. And similarly, under this framework, you were also looking for evidence, but a little bit more of it is evidence for, which, social psych has taught us a lot about biases. But anyway, that's a talk for another day. So yeah, let's talk about those 3 types. Okay, so content-related evidence. This is related to, shocker, content validity. So this is based upon an analysis of the body of knowledge surveyed. So it can be thought of as the degree to which elements of an assessment instrument are relevant to and representative of the target construct for that particular assessment purpose. Now this is going to be really similar to content validity. Oh wait, I lied. This definition is going to be really similar to the Anastasi definition, but the emphasis here is on the focus on contents of the construct and how well they are represented on our test. So content validity assumes that the target construct can be broken down into elements, and that the script is like right in camera. Blah, 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 you don't care, audience, but I do. So that's what the bobbing and weaving is. And that so thus the content validity assumes the target construct can be broken down into elements and that we can obtain a representative sample of these elements. Domain sampling is one way to do that, folks. Okay, so next we got criterion related evidence. So this one is criterion validity. Again, they're shocking revelations, I know. So this genre of evidence is based upon the relationship between scores on a particular test and performance or abilities on a second measure or in real life. The idea is that you are comparing your measure to something else that is not your measure. You're looking at criterion outside of objective things. So that's the idea. And lastly, we have construct-related evidence, and this is related to construct validity. So this is based upon the investigation of the psychological characteristics or constructs of the test itself. And so this one is a little more fun. This one I do the least amount of work in because it's very theory-based. You rely on experts, and we'll talk all about it in the module chunk dedicated to it. So cool. Okay, so that's it for the broad overview. I'm going to dive into the 3 different validity genres. So check those out. I'm going to go into more detail, so don't just try and get away, or get away with is a strong word, but I'm going to elaborate deeply on the types and give examples, and don't skip it. I'll talk to you later. Bye!